interview with Alan Deardorff, an international trade economist who started in physics at Stanford University before switching to economics at Cornell and then built a career around trade theory and trade policy at the University of Michigan, including work on the Michigan model used to analyze trade agreements. You can read more about Alan Deardorff on our website, 6degrees.blog, and our Instagram page, 6 Degrees Away. Thank you so much and enjoy the interview.
To begin, you began in physics at Stanford before shifting to economics at Cornell. What
That's right.
pulled you towards international trade?
Okay, well, okay. I was a terrible student in physics. So that's the reason that I left physics. There's no way I would have been able to or wanted to continue in physics. It was just too hard for me. Uh, so I needed to do something. I needed to go to graduate school because back then, if I didn't, I would have been drafted and had to go to Vietnam. And I'd had a few courses in economics and done reasonably well in them, certainly better than in physics. So I chose economics as the uh, subject that I would try to go to graduate school in. The timing was really good because in addition to the government threatening to draft me if I didn't go to graduate school, the government also had what was called the National Defense Education Act, which provided very generous fellowships for people to go to graduate school. And even though I had not been a very good student, I was able to get that and therefore had my way paid through graduate school. I applied to several schools, including Cornell. Cornell was the best of those I applied to that accepted me, so that's why I went there. I did not plan to study international trade, although I had had some exposure to it. As an undergrad, I went to Stanford's campus in Germany for 6 months, where they send along Stanford faculty to teach some of the courses, and they happened to send along an economist. Um, and he taught a course in international economics over there, and I liked it. I wasn't wild about it, but it was found it somewhat interesting. So when I was at Cornell, um, it was natural, in addition to my required courses, for me to take the courses in international economics. And uh, I enjoyed those and uh, actually ended up retaking one of the courses because the when I took it, the normal instructor was on leave that year, so I took it from somebody else, uh, and so I took it again from him in my last year, in my fourth year at Cornell. And when I was on the job market, he called me up after class once and said, well, I thought of myself at that point as a theorist, okay, just doing economic theory on whatever. Uh, and he said he'd gotten a call from Michigan. They had an opening for an international economist. Would I be willing for him to tell them that that's what I was? And for the sake of getting a job, I said, sure, absolutely, yeah. Uh, so I got hired to teach international economics, even though I hadn't really thought of that as my specialty. Uh, After I got that job, I changed the subject of my dissertation from a topic in just pure theory that was not working out for me to some ideas that I had that happened to be about international trade. So I don't know if I did that because of the job or what, but anyway, I did. And as a result, that sort of determined my whole career as being an international economist with a specialty mostly in international trade. It turns out just by accident that my own abilities uh, fit remarkably well into what back then was the literature on international trade theory. And so I was lucky and I did quite well in that and was able to publish well. this whole subject of economics has changed quite a bit. In fact, it was kind of changing a lot back then. And it's become far more technical, far more mathematical, far more abstract in some sense than it used to be. I don't know that I would be able to do it today if I were starting out, but it fit me really, really well. And so it gave me a career that I very much enjoyed.
So I'll ask a question now.
Sure. Your name is Marcel.
Marcelo. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Marcelo is interested in economics, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity. And thank you so much for being so open to.
Yeah, well,
Thank
sure.
you.
Why not?
So staying with origins, you worked closely with, sorry for my pronunciation, Jaroslav Vanik.
Yeah, he was, I think it's pronounced Yaroslav uh,
Ah, okay.
Vanya. Uh,
Um,
and yeah, he was the instructor that my first year at Cornell, I took international finance from him because he was the one that taught that. I ended up taking just about I think every course that he offered because I really liked his instruction. We never became all that close. Uh, as friends. I mean, we were fine, but for example, the year before me, he had a student uh, he became very close to, and I think would invite him to dinner and that sort of thing. He never did that with me, but he is the instructor who asked me if I'd be willing to be uh, told to Michigan as an international economist. So yeah, I worked with him quite a lot. Yes.
yeah, no, I was gonna ask what lasting lesson from his mentorship still shapes your approach to trade theory.
Oh well. Uh, Mainly, I think that he was really, as is not unusual in people that do international trade, he was really into using diagrams, and those fit me extremely well, and that provided really the basis for my career. So the way he did his economics just fit very well uh, with me. He was. It, in my second year, I would have taken international trade theory from him, but as I said before, he was on leave or on sabbatical or something, and they brought down a guy named Ronald Jones from University of Rochester to teach the courses that year, or to teach the trade course that year. So I took the trade course from Ron Jones, uh, and he was great. But later on, while I was at Cornell, one of the things we had to do was an exam on an oral exam on the field that we were specializing in, or the fields, I should say. So I took that oral exam on international trade theory from Yaroslav Vanyak. Uh, I did, I didn't do very well. But he responded to that. He says, "Oh, well, that's because you took it from Ron Jones, not from me." So uh, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I loved Ron Jones. I thought he was wonderful, and he continued to be a very good friend of mine for years. Even Vanyak never did. I mean, after I left, I never had any contact with Vanyak after that. But Ron Jones, I did. Yeah. Anyway, yes, I did study under him.
So, moving into collaboration, how did your work with Bob Stern on the Michigan model begin? And what impact has it had on how economists and policymakers analyze trade agreements?
Okay. Well, it was Bob Stern who hired me. He was the one that had called Vanyak to ask if I was a trade economist. And my impression is that he uh, was in a bit of a minority about hiring me after my visit to Michigan, but he pushed for it. And for some reason, he saw in me something that he thought would work out well, and I would say that it did. So he became my mentor at Michigan, and for the first half a dozen years that I was at Michigan, although we met a lot and he read my papers and gave me feedback on them, we did not attempt to do any work together as co-authors. I think, I didn't, I wasn't aware of this at the time, but I think he suspected correctly that I would do much better if I just developed my career on my own so that people wouldn't think that somehow or other it was just his work that I was representing. So only after I got tenure uh, did we start working together. Now, as I recall, what happened was that he got a request from the U.S. Department of Labor to, let me see if I can remember this exactly. They had an internal report that had been put together by their own economists about how they should go about uh, estimating what would be the effects of some trade policy changes, specifically, I think, the tariff cuts that the U.S. had done before and were negotiating to do more of. So they had this document. They asked Bob to evaluate it and give suggestions. And I guess they must have offered to pay for that. Anyway, rather than do it himself, he basically hired two people to do it. Me and a former graduate student at Michigan who had left just the year before, a guy named Ed Leamer, who has, by the way, gone on to be better known than I am in the economic sphere. So Ed was an econometrician, meaning he did the application of statistical methods uh, to data in economics. And he came up with a method that fit very well with his expertise. I came up with something a little bit different, which was basically to just use economic theory and plug some numbers into it to work out what the effects would be. Okay. Bob took these two proposals to the Labor Department. And if I remember correctly, they didn't like mine. But I think they may have hired Ed and Bob to continue doing what Ed had proposed. Whatever became of that, I've forgotten. But Bob decided to use the funding he got from the Labor Department to also, even though they hadn't accepted it, have me go ahead with what I had proposed. They had worked with Bob on that, and so I did. And it was that work that grew into over the course of, I'm sure, several years, what the Michigan model of world production and trade. It is, as I indicated a moment ago, it's not econometrics. We didn't uh, gather lots of data and then fit regressions to them to figure out what was going to happen. That would have been Ed's approach. Our approach was simply using economic theory of supply and demand, plug in numbers, and guess, really just guess, at the uh, what we call elasticities, the responsiveness of supply and demand and trade to changes in prices, and draw upon a literature that already existed where those sorts of things had been estimated using econometric techniques, but we didn't do any of that estimation ourselves to calculate the effects and make estimates of what the effects would be. And in the end, I mean, this expanded as we worked on it more and more, and then we started getting um, requests to do this work, and it developed into the Michigan model. I should I should say that similar approaches were being done by others in the country. And so we were not the only ones. Uh, and I don't think we were the most prominent of the groups that started doing this kind of work. It has come to be called computable general equilibrium analysis, CGE, computable general equilibrium. And it was not entirely respectable in a sense. The work that we did on this could not get published in the very top journals. And because it was what I said it was. It was just simple theory with numbers plugged in. It wasn't very sophisticated. It was complicated to do because in order to do it for entire economies and entire countries. Our first model, I think we had 18 countries. Later, we expanded it to 34. Our model had 29 sectors in the economy. So it had a lot of equations that you had to put the numbers into, and then you had to solve those equations, which, of course, we had to do on a computer. And when we were doing this, there were no laptops or personal computers or anything. We were doing it on the mainframe computer. And the mainframe computer, even though it was physically a very large thing, apparently, filling an entire room, was very limited in what it could do. So we actually had to do some sort of shortcuts and approximations to solve the model. That was one of the things that I worked very hard on, was figuring out how to solve this model with this, what we didn't realize, but was actually a pretty primitive computer. So that's what we did, but it would never have gotten into the top journals. And I don't think it ever, had I done this sort of work before I got tenure, I don't think I would have gotten tenure because it wouldn't have gone into the sorts of journals that my colleagues needed to see me publish in order to get tenure, to get promoted. But because we didn't do it till after I already had tenure, that was fine. I continued to do other sorts of work, just theoretical work, and continued to publish in good journals. But I did this kind of work along with Bob Stern for, oh gosh, maybe maybe 15 years. At some point, a student of ours, a woman by the name of Drusilla Brown, uh, started working with us and indeed built a model along with Bob of the U.S. and Canadian trade agreement. I was not involved with that. Uh, and she became our co-author on pretty much, oh, I don't know, dozens and dozens of papers that we did for quite a few years.
Um, to clarify a core idea, you have noted that Ricardo's comparative advantage can break down for individual products, but holds on average. How do you explain that nuance to non-economists, and why does it matter?
Uh, yeah, okay. Well, uh, I don't know that I've ever tried to explain the nuance to non-economists. I'm not even sure I've tried to explain the result to non-economists. When I've talked to non-economists about comparative advantage, uh, I just talk about it the same way Ricardo did, and I will mention that as your economic models start including more than just two goods and two countries, which is what Ricardo had, uh, complications arise, and you can't make any predictions for specific products. I don't think I tend to go into the reasons for that because that would involve concepts that would be a little bit hard to explain as well, things like complementarities and so forth. So I don't know that I've tried to explain that. Um, what was your other question about that? You said two things, but what?
I asked, how do you explain that nuance, and why does it matter?
Oh, why does it matter? Well, it matters because uh, people are critical of the idea of comparative advantage. Uh, if they are opposed to international trade or see some of the costs, the real costs that arise from international trade, they love to jump on examples of where it looks like comparative advantage doesn't apply, and therefore they want to argue that the whole theory is garbage. And I've stopped teaching now, but I have in the past had in the slides that I use for teaching examples, quotations from people dismissing the law of comparative advantage for reasons like that. And it's not that they are wrong, because it is possible to come up with examples where it just looks like trade isn't following comparative advantage. And for individual goods, it isn't. So that's why it's important to know that the general idea on average does hold, and a corollary that isn't obviously true, but is true, is that the benefits from international trade apply in general, even for the individual cases where the pattern of trade is not seeming to conform to the law.
Staying with practice, where do you see
Mhm.
trade theory most often misunderstood in policy debates, and what can scholars do to be more genuinely policy relevant?
So your first question is, what about trade theory is most misunderstood
Yeah,
in policy debates?
yes.
Uh, well, the, everything about trade theory from Ricardo and economists' work seems to be misunderstood because policymakers look they look very naturally at when a trade, let's say, expands, it always is going to hurt some people while it helps others. Okay? That's true. Our theories have always told us that it's true. Ricardo knew that it was true, that some people are hurt within a country while others benefit. What the theory is able to do is to establish that the gains outweigh the losses. But that doesn't mean there aren't any losses. Well, the policy debate tends to focus only on the losses. The idea that buyers benefit from cheaper imports, people seem to recognize it, but they can't imagine, apparently, uh, that they can't imagine that the benefits to buyers could be important enough to outweigh the losses to the losers. Uh, and that's understandable because the reason really is that the number of buyers, the number of consumers in the economy is so much vastly larger than the number of those who are hurt by trade, those individual in the producers, that the gains are very small for individual people, but they add up to a huge amount. That's just hard for people to understand, for people to believe, hard for people to even want to take into account. Now, unfortunately, we have not done a good job. And this has been true through my whole career and probably for 2 centuries. We economists have not done a good job of pushing policymakers to acknowledge and prepare for the harm that is done to the losers. We don't have good policies for helping them. If the government's going to make a change in policy, like a trade agreement, that's going to help a lot of people but hurt other people, it has to at least acknowledge the harm to those who are hurt. And probably it ought, ideally, although this is a political question, to do something to compensate them. We do very little. In the United States, for many years, we had a policy called trade adjustment assistance, which meant that if you were hurt by international trade, you could go to the government and ask for help, ask for money. Uh, that was run through the U.S. Department of Labor and was probably one of the reasons why they were talking to Bob and me about trade. Our policy was never a very good one, and it was canceled, or, well, I think it expired at some point and wasn't renewed by Congress back in I don't know when exactly, but it's been half a dozen years at least since that program has existed. And our policymakers have not restored it. And it wasn't a very good program anyway, but it was better than nothing. And uh, so that's a problem. Uh, in some countries, and in Europe, I think they do a better job of this, although not perfect, than we do. But that's the mistake, I guess, that we economists have made has been, I think, not to push harder for policies like that.
Looking across decades from the 1970s to today, how has your view of globalization's benefits and risks evolved, especially the balance between multilateral and regional or bilateral deals?
Oh, okay. Um, well, I think it's certainly true that like I hope other economists, over the last half century, have become increasingly aware of the costs to those who lose, the thing I was just talking about a minute ago. And not just but our discipline has focused a lot more on quantifying and the costs to those who are hurt by trade. You might have heard of, there's a whole literature now in economics about the China shock. The fact that when we admitted China to the World Trade Organization, uh, it caused a tremendous increase in their exports and a shock to those who lose from trade that was unprecedented. Okay, and that's been quantified. Now, the China shock, the studies of it are about the harm that was done. They tend not to look at the benefits. Again, the benefits were bigger than the harm, but they didn't focus on that. Anyway, we've become much more aware of all of that. Now, the other question you asked about, though, is multilateral versus bilateral or regional trade
Yeah.
agreements. We've known since before I was born, I think, uh, that trade agreements that don't involve everybody, bilateral ones in particular, uh, have both benefits and costs, not that different people gain and lose, but that the overall benefits of a bilateral trade agreement might not be larger than the costs. Because when you, let's say, as we did with Canada and Mexico, when you lower tariffs on imports just from them and not from other countries, you will get some of the gains from trade, the traditional gains from trade, where you buy from, let's say, Mexico, something that you were producing yourself. But you also get something called trade diversion, which is you start buying from Mexico something you previously bought, let's say, from Brazil, a country that's not in the trade agreement. Trade diversion, we were taught by a paper back in the 40s or 50s, is harmful because your country is ending up buying something that costs more than it would have paid to buy it from the other country. Uh, a bilateral or regional trade agreement causes both trade creation and trade diversion. Trade creation is unambiguously beneficial in economic terms overall. Trade diversion is unambiguously harmful in economic terms overall for the country that does it. You can't know, well, it's never going to be obvious which of these is going to be bigger. Okay. And a lot of the work that Bob Stern and I and Drusilla did was to quantify the effects of trade agreements, regional ones, well, and multilateral ones, actually. And we did find, and I think in only one case that we actually studied, did we find apparently a net loss from a trade agreement. If I remember correctly, we applied our model to the issue of the country of Tunisia becoming a member of, or not a member of, having a free trade agreement with the European Union, although back then it probably was not called that, the European Community. Uh, and our models found that under certain circumstances it could be harmful for Tunisia. Why? Because they were going to switch to buying more expensive stuff from Europe than they'd been buying from other countries. Uh, so the harm from trade diversion is real. It could, and our model suggested in one case that it might, in fact, be harmful to the country. That was the only time we ever found that. So by and large, I think my view is that bilateral and regional trade agreements are almost always good things, even though they're not the best that would be possible. And if you can't get multilateral agreements, for the last 25 years, 30 years, we haven't been able to. Doing bilateral and regional agreements is, I think, a good idea, even though the case for it is not quite as strong as multilateral.
On recent history, you once said you had not seen anyone do on trade policy what the Trump administration had done. What
Mhm.
lasting effects, good or bad, do you think those actions have? And what surprised you?
Okay. You like your questions to always have two parts, and
Yeah, I know. We can just cut it down to just one part. That's just good when you're
well,
writing and you're
I
thinking.
imagine one approach to that would be for me to just pick the one I want to answer and not
Yeah,
try.
exactly. It
Oh,
gives you more options.
but anyway, uh, yeah, yeah, throughout my career until Trump came along, uh, what happened with tariff policy was that tariffs were negotiated downward to lower, smaller and smaller tariffs in multiple trade agreements of various sorts. And the only exception to that, and it was an important exception, was that we've always had in our laws, and other countries do too, uh, particular mechanisms by which individual tariffs might be increased. I won't talk about them all, but the commonly used one is called anti-dumping. Okay. If imports are coming in and the competing industry at home um, feels that the prices that the foreign exporters are charging are unfairly low, making it hard for them to compete, they can request an anti-dumping duty. And there's a process in our government, this has been going on for more than a century, I think, that they can request and maybe get a tariff. It's really a tariff. It's called an anti-dumping duty, but it's a tax on imports, just like any other tariff, applied to the product from the specific place that the dumping was coming, and usually from the specific company that was exporting. So we've had some mechanisms by which it was possible to increase tariffs, and those mechanisms were used quite a lot over the years, uh, but very narrowly, very on very specific products, usually on very specific companies or countries. Uh, Never, with one exception now that I'm thinking of, uh, did any president simply say, "I'm going to raise tariffs overall." All right. Or overall against some country. The one exception to that was President Nixon. Uh, Back on August 15th of 1971, when the U.S. had been having real problems with its balance of payments, and for reasons that get beyond international trade, he announced several changes in policy. But one of the ones relevant here is that he put a 10%, he called it surcharge, on all imports. Okay. Uh, that was unprecedented at the time, and never happened again until Trump came along. And his 10% surcharge only lasted for a few months, as I recall. And exactly how he was able to get away with it, I'm not sure. But anyway, uh, it was a surprise. Now, it was a surprise along with several other surprises that he announced in that same speech, that some of which got maybe more attention than that surcharge. He basically took us off the gold standard. He took the world off the gold standard, which was a very big deal in international finance. And he did some other things as well. Anyway, until Trump came along, with the exception of Nixon, nothing like that had ever been done, or even, as far as I know, considered. So it wasn't something that we would normally talk about what the effects might be of. For decades, I was teaching about tariffs, but pretty much the examples that I had, except for anti-dumping duties and a few things like that, was of tariffs coming down, not going up. Uh, when Trump came in, the very first thing that happened in his first term uh, was that tariffs went up on, oh, what did he raise the tariffs on? Washing machines and one other product, and I'm forgetting now what the two products were. That actually was not an action by Trump. I was saying before, we had various laws that allowed particular tariffs to be put on, and the request for those had come while I guess Obama was still president, and the process simply happened to finish in the first I think, few months of Trump's first administration. So yeah, some tariffs went up, but that was very normal. But then within just a very few months, he suddenly announced that he was going to raise tariffs on all imports from all countries of all steel and aluminum. A 25% tariff on steel and 10% tariff on aluminum. That had nothing like that had ever been announced or done. He managed to find a law that had never been used in this way before that allowed him to get away with it within U.S. law. He claimed that it was a national security issue. We've always had, I shouldn't say always, but for many decades, we've had a law in the books that said if trade is undermining the country's national security, you can use a tariff to stop it. And the kind of reasoning you might think of would be, well, suppose we became very reliant upon imports of munitions from a country we might go to war with. Well, then we're going to get screwed then, right? If we go to war. So you might want to put a tariff on them to make sure that you produce munitions here at home. That's the kind of thing that I think the law was intended for. Well, he put it on steel and aluminum from all countries, including all of our friends. Okay, so the notion that we needed to cut back our imports of steel and aluminum from Canada or from the European Union or whoever for national security reasons didn't make any sense to most of us, but he managed to do it. And our system in the U.S. I don't remember exactly to what extent he had to defend that in courts or whatever, but anyway, he got away with it. Uh, and I suspect that having succeeded with that, he thought, "Oh, this is fun. I like this. I like." He had always liked tariffs, by the way. He will tell you, and there's evidence that yes, absolutely, long before he was president, he has liked tariffs and does not much like international trade. So he was eager to do something more. Well, his next target wasn't a product; it was a country, China. And he started putting tariffs on vast amounts of what they exported to us, and he did it over and over, and he kept raising those tariffs or expanding the number of products upon which they were applied. And again, nothing like that had ever happened. He defended that on grounds that we had another one of these special laws for justifying tariffs. It was called Section 301 of U.S. trade law, uh, which, by the way, was never considered legal under international trade law. The World Trade Organization, for example, has never approved of that. They do approve of anti-dumping, but not this. But anyway, he used that law to claim that things China was doing were unfair, and therefore he could put on tariffs. He did it, and again, he got away with it. Well, I say he got away with it. That's not actually true. In both the steel and aluminum tariffs and on the China tariffs, the other countries responded very reasonably quickly. In China's case, they responded the same day. Each day that he would announce new tariffs on China, it seemed like we'd see in the news that China just put new tariffs on the U.S. And so the retaliation was fast and furious. From the point of view of an economist, that means that even what he thought he was trying to accomplish was for sure hurting the United States. But he did it anyway, and he felt it was doing something good. Did it alter trade? Yeah, absolutely, it did, and he liked that because he could see it altering trade. Did it benefit people in the U.S.? Overall, no, but it did benefit particular producers whose main concern was competing with imports of, let's say, steel from Europe or any product from China. So there were winners and losers. The economics of us tells us that the country as a whole was hurt by it, but Trump didn't believe it, and many in Congress, including, by the way, Democrats. Prior to Trump, it has always been true during my career that Republicans were much more skeptical of international trade. They were much more protectionist, wanting higher tariffs, although generally not getting them, uh, and resisting trade agreements to reduce tariffs. It was the Republicans who were very pro-trade up until Trump came along. So the mystery here is why it is that the Republican Party so quickly was willing to accept Trump and his view on something that just contradicted what Republicans for throughout my lifetime uh, disagreed with him on. But they did, and I don't know why.
Do you think with these, I'll cut off Marcel for a second here. Do you think with these tariffs, it's Trump's idea, but sort of more executed and polished out by economists and experts in the field, or do you think he's just the sort of judge, jury, executioner? It's his idea, and he's just um, making it happen.
Oh, it's definitely his idea. Yeah. Certainly in his first term, he still had a fair number of uh, well-trained, reputable economists working for him, and they resisted this. He that did have one economist working for him, a guy named Peter Navarro, who is a PhD in economics from Harvard, but had never specialized in international trade economics. But somewhere along the line in his career, I would guess maybe 10 years ago or something, began to be very negative about trade and especially about China, and had written, I think, a book and probably many other things that were anti-trade. And Trump brought him in to his administration, and I think he's still in his administration. Peter Navarro, by the way, went to jail, but not for his views on trade. He went to jail for stuff that he did around the uh, transition from Trump to Biden and the January 7th and all that stuff. Or was it 6th? Well, anyway. um, but Trump was more or less surrounded by reputable economists who resisted what he was trying to do with tariffs. Um, but he had the power and was able to do it. It's very he was always very clear that this is what he wanted, and he probably had to get their help a little bit to find out initially what particular U.S. laws he could use. As I said, in his first term, he did use U.S. laws to do the things he wanted to do. In his second term, one of the things broadly, not just about economics, he's done a much better job of having people in his administration, only people in his administration that fully agree with what he wants. And so he doesn't need to worry about that so much. And it appears he doesn't seem to, or he thinks at least, he doesn't have to worry so much about U.S. laws. Uh, I mean, the fact that well, in his first administration, it was he or his administration that negotiated, uh, they basically renegotiated the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, our trade agreement with Canada and Mexico. They renegotiated it, they renamed it, or Trump, I think, again, this is purely him, renamed it as the U.S. USMCA, U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement. I always have to remember which order they go in, uh, and got it approved by Congress. It didn't change much. It made some slightly protectionist changes. I didn't like it, but it was only slightly more protectionist than NAFTA had been. But it was put in place, and he put it in place. And then he comes in and he put tariffs on Canada and Mexico. So there's a trade agreement that he negotiated, that he signed, and he just ignored it. Uh, and so he's breaking his own law, you might say. Uh, he did the same thing with, oh no, this isn't fair. No, that was his agreement. Okay, he's done the same thing with some of our other trade agreements, but those weren't ones that he had negotiated. So yeah, it's all him.
On leadership dynamics, with the United States stepping back in some areas and China more forward leaning, How might rules and norms shift if China plays a larger systemic role?
Well, in, in the trade area, which is the only one I really know much about, I think we very much are moving in the direction of the U.S. simply becoming less relevant. We have become and will become more so, I would suspect, more protectionist, more walled off from the world economy. I don't see any sign that other countries are doing the same. And indeed, China is replacing us, or trying to, and I think probably succeeding in providing the leadership on continuing international trade and maybe even continuing to reduce trade barriers. So I think the world economy is going to move in kind of a funny direction. It'll move in the direction of the United States playing less of a role and just being relying on ourselves much more than we do on other countries, while most of the rest of the world will trade more freely with each other and benefit from doing that. It's kind of ironic because for the first several decades after World War II, there was one part of the world, well, that's not quite fair. There were two parts of the world that were walled off from most international trade. One was the developing countries who were very resistant to reducing trade barriers, but gradually over time they began to recognize that they would benefit by doing so, and so they did join the world economy. The other was the Soviet bloc. They never engaged in anything like normal market international transactions. And to the extent that they traded, and they did trade a fair amount, it was always by barter. They would do deals with other countries where we'll import from you certain products if you will buy our products. And so we had the world with a big chunk of it, the Soviet bloc, cut off from the world economy. Well, I think we're hopefully not moving that extremely, but we're moving in the direction of the United States being cut off, but the rest of the world still engaging freely in international trade. Um, if that's where we go, I don't like it, obviously, uh, but it will hurt the United States, but it won't hurt us dramatically, I don't think, because we're such a big country. We can produce most of what we need, and we'll find ways to do deals to get the things that we don't. And the rest of the world is an even bigger country or a bigger place. And so I think they'll survive uh, quite nicely. They'll be hurt, but they won't be hurt dramatically by not trading with as much with the United States. So it does seem like that's the direction we're moving in. And frankly, I don't see any way we're ever going to reverse it. It was really remarkable that after World War II and the hugely protectionist world economy that we had during the period between World Wars I and II, uh, it was really remarkable that we changed from that we went into a system where we gradually, over decades, had the whole world, except the Soviet bloc, uh, reducing their barriers to trade. And so that we got to where we were before Trump, of a world economy. It wasn't free trade, but boy, it was so much closer to free trade than it had been in the 1930s. It was just amazing. It was not easy. It took a long time with protracted, difficult negotiations going on, but it accomplished that. Well, we very quickly moved away from that in the United States. And the economics and the politics of trade policy are such that once you raise a tariff, it's very hard to ever lower it. The ones that have gotten lowered were the ones that were built into the law. So those special laws that allow us to put on tariffs like we did on washing machines, it's built into our law that that tariff must disappear after a certain number of years. The tariffs that Trump's been putting in don't have that feature, so they aren't going to go away automatically. And once you have a tariff in place, you have domestic producers competing with imports in that sector. And whether they ever asked for the tariff or not, they certainly benefit from it and will get hurt badly if you remove it. And they know that. So they'll fight like hell to keep it. Uh, a nice example. Have you ever heard of the chicken tariff?
No.
I wouldn't I wouldn't think you would have, although I have seen it mentioned in the news occasionally. Back in the middle of the 1960s, under President Lyndon Johnson, the United States had a dispute with the European community, as it was called then, about chickens. They had put some sort of a barrier in place. I don't think it was a tariff. It was probably a health kind of thing or something on our exports of chickens for people to eat. Uh, and we didn't like it. So we got into a dispute with them, and to basically retaliate against them for whatever they were doing with about chickens, uh, we raised a tariff on imported small trucks. Okay. Uh, Now, at that time, almost all of our motor vehicle trade was just with the Europeans. We didn't buy much from Japan even back then or anywhere else. So we didn't just put the tariff on them, we put the tariff on all light trucks from everywhere. Okay. A substantial tariff, 25%. Our tariff on cars and previous to that time on trucks had been 2.5%. So we made the tariff 10 times larger on trucks in response to a barrier on chickens. It became called the chicken tariff because it was motivated by chicken trade. Uh, Had nothing to do, of course, directly with chickens. I don't know whatever happened to the chicken dispute. That went away, but that tariff never did. We still have it. Uh, and we probably will never get rid of it. I mean, some years ago, I was at a meeting that we had here in the Ford School with some people that worked for the automobile companies nearby. Uh, and I don't remember what the purpose of our meeting was. We were probably talking about some trade agreement or something. But the subject of the chicken tariff came up, and they laughed and they said, "Oh yeah, don't you ever get rid of that. We'll never allow that to be removed. We love that chicken tariff because it's allowing U.S. companies to make and successfully sell light trucks." That otherwise the imported ones would undercut them in price. So that's an example of a tariff that was put in place more than 50 years ago. Didn't go away and probably never will. Well, that's going to happen now, likely to happen with most of the tariffs that Trump puts in. You notice Biden came in as president. He claimed, I think genuinely, to think that the tariffs that Trump had put in place on China and on the metals were not good. He shouldn't have done that. Okay. So did he take them off? No way. He did negotiate some deal with the European Union to basically replace a tariff with a quota that would make them a little bit happier. But he certainly didn't just get rid of the tariffs because those who benefit from the tariffs would scream. And as I said, he was a Democrat anyway. Democrats had always been more in favor of tariffs than Republicans had been. So I don't see how we're ever going to get the United States to back off, at least substantially, from what Trump has done, even if Trump and his party are no longer running the show. So we're kind of stuck with that, I think.
Turning to resilience, COVID highlighted overspecialization in supply chains. What policy mix, such as diversification, stockpiles, friendshoring, and standards, best balances resilience with efficiency?
I'm not sure. Uh, the COVID and the surrounding problems with supply chains and so forth did a pretty good job of convincing the private sector that, oops, relying on a single supplier of something is not a good idea because all sorts of things could happen that will disrupt that. Now, they've gotten that message before occasionally. I remember the tsunami that devastated Japan messed up a bunch of supply chains, and so companies had responded to that by trying to diversify their sources. So it's been in the interests of the private sector to diversify, to avoid relying too heavily on any one source, including, by the way, uh, domestic source. I mean, uh, we're a big enough country that it's not real likely that we're going to lose an entire sector from inside the United States, but there's no guarantee. International trade by diversifying across countries and trading a lot, that's the best way one has of diversifying and avoiding the risks of things being cut off. And the incentives are there if the companies are willing to or motivated to pay attention to the risks and the long-term possibilities of having problems. Now, you always have the problem that everybody's more concerned about right now than they are about the future. And if right now you can get the input you want most cheaply from just one place, well, the incentive to just buy from that one place is pretty strong because it would cost you money to spend more to buy it from another place. But I think maybe COVID helped us to see those incentives, and I think there's been some response. If we don't trust, and I don't necessarily trust the incentives to be strong enough for them to do that, is there a policy that could nudge them in that direction? I don't know. I I mean, using tariffs nudges them to just buy more domestically. Uh, not for in most cases, I don't think that's going to be all that helpful. What you really need is to diversify, and just buying domestically is just the opposite of diversifying. Uh, I suppose I could imagine trying to use a policy where the tariff would be higher on countries from which you buy more, so that you'd be encouraged to spread it out. I don't, I've never even heard such a policy mentioned, except by me saying it today. So no, I don't think I'm not aware of any policies that could help with that.
Focusing again on the United States and China, if tariffs alone will not solve their trade frictions, what combination of tools such as negotiations, alliances, standard enforcement, export controls, and IP remedies actually move the needle?
Okay, from this, what is it you're trying to solve? You started with that, but I'm not sure I got it. What is it with China that we need to fix?
I mean, you were talking about before how the US had a specific grudge against China,
Mhm.
and so they
Okay.
put a super tariff on China, and China
Okay.
responded in that same way.
Well, yeah, the grudge that we had was, I think, at least in part, a valid grudge. It wasn't specifically about international trade. It was that when international companies, US and other international companies, choose to invest in China, build factories there to produce stuff, China would, one way or another, steal their technology, okay, learn their technology. There was a way that they did it that was above board. That is, they required companies, they say, if you want to invest here, you have to have a domestic partner. You have to invest with a Chinese company working with you. And by doing that, you basically end up turning over your technology to that Chinese company. Okay, so they were kind of explicit about that. The American and other claims about China was that it wasn't just that even if they didn't invest with the Chinese companies, once they were operating in China, China was busily watching them, learning from them, stealing their technologies. That's much harder to document. There seems to be a consensus among American firms that that was happening. And maybe it was. I have no idea. I suspect that to some extent it was happening, and it's always been happening with international investment. When a company invests in another country, whatever the country is, the efforts that they will make to learn what they're doing and maybe try to duplicate it to make some money, it's going to happen. In any case, that was the basis, the main basis, I believe. Well, no, okay, it was one of the two main bases for the China for our tariff on China under Section 301 that Trump did. The other important basis was the argument that China subsidizes domestic firms. Okay, now that is almost certainly true. Uh, but it's harder to document because it's not a market economy. The Chinese, the Communist Party of China, plays such a role in the Chinese government, which in turn plays such a role in all of their companies, that it can subsidize them without necessarily just writing them a check. They're giving them all sorts, they can give them all sorts of favors that reduce their costs. Okay. Now, we have, among those laws I mentioned, I talked about the anti-dumping law. Well, another one of the laws we've had and have used over the years is a law against such subsidies. If imports are subsidized by a foreign government, then we have a section of our law that allows us to put a tariff on those imports to offset the benefits that that subsidy provides. In the case of China, because of their economic system and the way their government is so intertwined with so much of their business, it's much harder to document or even prove that there are such subsidies or to know what the sizes of those subsidies are. But that was another basis for our use of those tariffs. But it wasn't done under the law that we allow for that. The law that we allow for that requires that you document what is the subsidy, how big is it, and how big, therefore, should the tariff be. He didn't do that. He just argued, hey, they subsidize a lot, which we know they do, and so let's put a bunch of tariffs on everything they send us, okay, without worrying about whether the particular products that we're putting the tariffs on really are subsidized or not, or by how much they are. So that's, I guess I would say ideally you should have stuck to just using that law the way it was originally written to be used and just do the harder work. But that work is hard given that China's economic system is different from ours. They do have a market economy to a large extent, but the role of their government is much more extensive. I mean, ours isn't zero. But Chinese government is much more involved with what goes on there than ours is. I should mention, in terms of the economics of it all, foreign subsidies to exports to our country are not bad. They're good. Okay, they lower the costs of what they sell us, and our buyers benefit from all of that. Now, yes, our competing sellers are hurt, but the economics of it is that our buyers are helped more than our sellers are hurt. And so, Paul Krugman, you've heard of Paul Krugman, right? No.
I have not.
Um,
Oh boy, that's sad. Okay. He was, and I suppose if he wanted to be it, still is, the very best international trade economist in the world. I'm an international trade economist. He was far better. He won the Nobel Prize, in fact, for his work in international trade. And he gradually began doing more and more public commentary, and he became a columnist for the New York Times. And he had a column twice a week in the New York Times for I don't know how many years, many, many years, which was widely read. And that made him, I think, much more famous than he ever became as just a trade economist. For the last year or two, however, he stepped down from the New York Times and he's continuing to write opinion pieces on something called Substack. Have you heard of that?
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's where I read him now. I didn't even know he was there for a while, but eventually I discovered him. Anyhow, he is the supreme trade economist in the world, in my opinion. Many, many years ago, although I've never been able to find it in writing, he said the optimal policy for dealing with a foreign government that subsidizes an export is to write a thank you note because it just benefits us. Now, it does hurt some of our people, but the benefit is bigger than the cost. So in economic terms, if China's subsidizing their companies, we should love it. We should just benefit from it. Now, if they put some of our businesses out of business, yeah, that's sad, but we're getting the benefits of all the stuff that they want to sell us, and they're bearing the cost, not us. Okay? The only way that economists would tend to say you could get in trouble doing that is if they do that in order to put us out of business, and this is crucial, and then raise their prices so that we end up having to pay more for what we buy from them. But it doesn't look like that's at all in the cards, or at least never was. So I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I should mention, by the way, though, that I don't think Trump himself ever cared that much about China's subsidies, if that's what they were doing, or stealing our intellectual property. I mean, he would be negative, he would be opposed to that, but that wasn't his big concern with China, and I think still is not. His big concern has always been the trade balance, that they export to us so much more than what we import from them. Now, in economic terms, that's nothing to be concerned about. We economists know that. He does not. And he has been very consistent in feeling that when countries sell us more than we sell to them, he says they are ripping us off. I think he's used those words. They're ripping us off. Okay. Economically, that's just not true. But that's what he thinks. And so because China is the biggest exporter by far in the world, he wants to go after them with tariffs. And he's going to keep doing it. And the only way we're going to get that to change would be if we, Americans and our government, cut back on the amount of stuff that we buy. Doesn't matter where we buy it from. If we bought less, the fact that we're running a trade deficit overall, which we are and have been for many years, means simply we buy more stuff, we spend more on stuff than our income. Okay? We spend more than our income. And other countries are doing just the opposite. They are spending less than their income. If you want trade balances to balance, you're going to have to get deficit countries like us to cut back on our spending, and surplus countries like China to increase their spending. Well, China, in fact, has been trying for years to get their people to spend more. They have a hard time doing that. And part of the reason is that they feel the need to save for bad things happening in the future because their government doesn't do much to help them. And so they have to do it on their own. In the United States, well, if if our government would simply get rid of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all those sorts of things, I think we'd probably have to cut back on what we spend. But is that a good idea? No, I don't think so. So it's not really clear what is ever going to happen to change what Trump really cares about with regard to China. I've said much more than I should have based on your question, but anyway.
That was interesting.
This is another sort of two-part question.
Mhm.
So on a slightly more personal note, I saw that you enjoy poker. How did you get into the game, and has poker influenced how you think about strategy or risk in economics?
Wow. Okay. I enjoy poker, but I don't enjoy poker for the risk. Uh, I enjoy it for, I guess you'd say, the social interaction with my colleagues whom I play poker with. And uh, we play for stakes that are the biggest loss I might ever have is something I'm comfortable with, given my income, and I more or less expect it. I'm pretty sure I lose more often than I win at our poker game. Uh, uh, Others of my friends and some of my and colleagues have a much bigger poker game, I gather, where they might win or lose thousands of dollars in an evening. They've never invited me, but if they did, I would say no. But one or two of the people I do play poker with regularly seem to enjoy those high risk games, but I do not. Uh, I just enjoy the interaction with the people and the games themselves. But just because I love cards, actually. You somehow learned that I play poker, but all my life, and especially all my marriage, uh, I've played various card games. In college, all I ever did was play bridge. Since college, or since graduate school, not so much bridge, but we play cribbage. Have you ever heard of cribbage?
No, I've heard of bridge, but not cribbage.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cribbage is a game it's a card game, but you play it with a board, a peg board, where you move pegs along to as you make progress in the game. And we play pinochle and I guess poker. So it's for cards and the social thing that I like it. Is it related at all to how I view economics? I don't think so. Uh, Certainly, I don't. I have no interest in taking any risks myself economically. Uh, many years ago, well, I've forgotten which house. Anyway, we my wife and I borrowed money to buy a house, and we borrowed a little bit more than we needed to, it turned out. And so we had a little bit of extra money, and uh, she or I got the idea maybe we should put it in the stock market. Uh, and I asked one of my colleagues at work, an expert in taxes, he was, uh, if he had a suggestion where we should put it. And he suggested putting the money into the company that owned 3 Mile Island. Have you ever heard of that?
The nuclear thing?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, it melted down. Now it had melted down when he told me that.
Mhm.
So you think, oh, that's got to be a terrible thing to buy. He said, yeah, they melted down, but they're still paying dividends. And with their dividends they're paying, the stock is worth far more than its price on the market, that the market overreacted to the nuclear disaster. And so it's cheap. So now's a good time to buy it. So we did. And then the company stopped paying dividends. And so the stock went way down, and well, it was worth much less. We hung on to it, and eventually it worked its way back up to about what we'd bought it at. So we didn't actually end up losing very much, and it wasn't a whole lot of money anyway. But that and various other experiences. Oh yeah, I once did very early in my career. I had my students play a little game where we pretended to put money into the foreign exchange markets
Mhm.
uh, and then watch how the actual markets did and find out whether we won or lost. And I played along with them, and I was one of the first to lose everything I put into it because I put my money into a currency that I thought would go one way, and instead it went the other way. So I've done a good job of teaching myself that I should not take risks. I'm a bad judge of those sorts of things. Uh, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Mhm. Finally,
Um,
or I guess Marcel can
no,
take,
no, no, please, please.
because I don't want it to come out of left field, because this is what we ask all of our interviewees. The same question at the end to sort of get a gauge from
oh.
people who are like professors like you or a monk to a billionaire, what they think. So, how do you define success, both professionally or personally?
Hmm. Well, just as a person, I guess I would define success as being happy, but happiness absolutely includes the happiness of my family, uh, and perhaps maybe their happiness more than my own. Uh, so that's where personally. Professionally, what the success in my career, well, given the career that I chose, uh, happiness or not happiness, well, it is happiness then too, but success is, uh, hmm, well, two things. One is writing and publishing papers that people value and maybe hopefully talk about. And maybe running into people at conferences where they mention that they like some of the things you've written. But the other big aspect of it is having students who go on to do well professionally. So uh, I didn't talk about the individual students I've had, and I haven't played that big a role. I mean, Yaroslav Vaniak played, if he knew it or not, a huge role, clearly, in determining my professional career. I may have had that huge a role for some of the people, some of my students. I don't really know. Uh, some years ago, well, one of the things that academics do, I assume they still do, uh, is have celebrations of a person's career. Typically, they don't wait till they die because that's no fun, although they may do it after they die as well. But they do have a celebration at some sort of a milestone age. And as I approached the age 65, which is now more than 15 years ago, my colleague Bob Stern, who played such an important role in my whole life, uh, organized what's called a Festschrift, uh, German term for party in writing, I guess you might say. Uh, and a Festschrift typically involves a published document celebrating a person's career. And the party part of it typically involves getting the writers of the chapters for that together in one place to have a conference celebrating that person's career. And when they held that for me, a lot of my former students came and spoke at it, and some of them wrote things about it. That was incredibly satisfying. It made me feel, it kind of felt like a capstone for my career. Now, that's over 15 years ago. I did continue to publish after that, although not nearly as much as I had before. And now I've completely stopped having any interest in doing that sort of thing. But professionally, that's the sort of thing that meant a lot to me.
Mhm. So this is a little more personal question because we couldn't end up going out to Michigan. But what do you think from a student perspective, Michigan's like, especially coming from Houston, is the weather shocking? What do you think about the campus? Just general.
Oh, I love it. I definitely love it. I mean, I came here just because it was the best place that offered me a job, and I didn't give much thought at all to what the town would be like or even what the school would be like, except for the Department of Economics that I would become a part of. I feel so lucky that I ended up here because I just cannot imagine a better place to live. The town is so wonderful. The university, as near as I can tell, it is as well run for those of us who are part of it as any university I've ever heard about. I feel very lucky. Now, I got to admit, a part of that luck, I came here single. And at the end, during, but mainly at the end of the first year, I met the woman. Well, she was working in the department. That's so I met her earlier, but the woman who's now my wife and has been ever since. She was born in Ann Arbor, so I'm sure I know she agrees with me that this is a wonderful place to be. But the fact that she's here is not going to help any of your friends trying to decide to come here. But I found it a wonderful place to be, partly because of that. Now, you mentioned shock about the weather.
Mhm.
Uh, well, we used to have winter. It's true.
Mhm.
I'm beginning to wonder this year if we ever will. The heat has continued far later in the fall now
Mhm.
than normal, and certainly our winters are not nearly as cold or snowy as they used to be. I grew up near Chicago, so this was no shock. It's true. I went to Stanford, uh, but then I went to Cornell, which also has winter. So it's not a problem for me. I understand there are people who don't like winter. I don't like heat. So I love it. Uh, and I think it's a fantastic environment to be in.
Mhm. So you definitely recommend?
Oh, definitely recommend. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank
did
you
you
so
say
much.
your sister's thinking of coming here?
She was gonna, so we toured a couple schools and she was thinking of going early decision to Michigan. She's gonna major in philosophy, so it's not business, but yeah.
I laugh because my wife and I are binging all the time on a show called The Conners. I don't suppose you've ever heard of it, but it's a
No.
sitcom. Uh, and just in a recent episode that I watched, uh, this one guy said that he's willing to bear a certain amount of cost for his wife's son to go to college in a way that's going to be costly for him. Uh, but then he says, as long as he doesn't major in philosophy.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's I'm not sure how monetarily successful it can make you, but I guess you can go into law and things like that or transfer. I think that was just like a sort of college counselor play of getting in easier.
Oh, okay. I think it's true that whatever you major in as an undergraduate probably won't make a difference to your life because these days you so often will go on to a graduate degree, and that will matter much more for that. But it just because I just saw this guy say that about philosophy, I had to tell you.
Yeah. I'll pass forward the message.
Okay.